Hey guys, welcome back to Brian's Mysteries and Adventures on Trail, and today we are going to be talking about a very difficult case, something that happened back in 2019, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. It's a case that I followed very closely just because I was starting my first thru hike that year. And for those of you that don't know, thru hiking is just when someone decides to attempt to hike an entire trail, like the Appalachian Trail, which this is where this case took place in 2019. And unfortunately, a bunch of hikers were, thru hiking that year, and they were accosted by a man named James L. Jordan, 30 years old, of West Yarmouth, Massachusetts. And he was just recently found not guilty by reason of insanity. And I know that's going to stir up a lot of, emotions between people, everybody that's involved. And so I wanted to talk about this case. I'll lay out what happened. But first I want to take a moment and honor Ronald Sanchez, who lost his life in this attack. And, this guy went through 3 tours in Iraq and was going out to the trail to find peace. I mean, he survived all those tours and then was murdered out on the trail by this man, James L. Jordan, who is diagnosed schizophrenic and amongst other mental illnesses. And according to his testimony, he is very empathetic to what happened, and we're going to get into more about what happened. But I just wanted to say that, obviously I am empathetic to mental illness, but there are also things that I think should be in place. I don't think that we handle it well in the United States or anywhere for that matter. I think people need more attention and they need more help and just things in place so that we can prevent tragedies like this, because according to media and court documents, James L. Jordan had been diagnosed with this prior, and he had other episodes of going out to the trail and harassing people, and had been warned to stay away from that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually read you guys the court documents and the story the way it's explained in court, just so that you get the actual facts, and then we'll talk about a little bit more of the outcome. So according to the criminal complaint filed in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Virginia, this happened down near Manassas, which is where, if those of you that are familiar with trail days, that's where this happened. The incident began when Jordan approached a group of 4 hikers somewhere in Jefferson National Forest in Western Virginia on a Friday evening. The hikers reported that Jordan was acting disturbed and unstable and was playing his guitar and singing. Later that night, the 4 set up a camp a few miles away from where they first encountered him in Wythe County, Virginia. Jordan appeared again and began threatening the hikers in their shelters, saying that he was going to pour gasoline on their tents and burn them up, all kinds of, horrible things. At this point, the 4 hikers decided to relocate their campsites, appropriately so. But Jordan then confronted them with a knife. Now, 2 of the hikers ran north on the trail to escape. They called 911 at 2:30 a.m. in the morning, saying they were chased by a man with a knife. Allegedly, Jordan eventually gave up the chase and unfortunately returned to the campsite near Mount Rogers National Recreation Area. He then reported began yelling and tormenting the 2 remaining hikers, a man and a woman. A verbal altercation occurred between Jordan and the male hiker, who, like I said, is Richard S. Sanchez Jr. of Oklahoma. Sanchez made an emergency call from his phone. Then Jordan began stabbing him in the upper part of his body, as the female hiker, who has not been identified, was just looking on in horror. According to the affidavit, when she saw her male companion fall to the ground, the female hiker attempted to run away. Jordan chased after her. He caught up to her and she raised her arms and surrendered. Jordan then began stabbing her. She suffered several stab wounds before falling down and playing dead. This ultimately saved her life. After which point, Jordan left and returned once again to the campsite. And after he left, the female hiker got up and continued to run down the trail, eventually coming up to another pair of hikers that were camping just off the trail. These 2 backpackers then helped the female victim hike 6 more miles to the trailhead, where they called 911. Now, can you imagine? You've just been, mortally wounded, well, almost mortally wounded, and you have to hike 6 more miles out just to call 911, because on these trails, a lot of times there's no real good cell reception. Anyway, the wounded hiker was transported to a nearby medical center in Bristol, Tennessee, where she recovered from her injuries. Jordan, meanwhile, made his way back down the trail and approached another pair of backpackers who were asleep in their tent, shouting at them that he needed a flashlight. Now, these two were obviously reluctant to talk to him. They had no idea what he was going on about, and obviously they had no idea of the horror that had happened, only moments ago. The authorities were able to ascertain the approximate location of the first stabbing using nearby cell phone tower data, and they deployed a tactical team of the Wythe County Sheriff's Department that began a 4-mile hike to the crime scene. At 6:14 a.m. the next morning, which was Saturday, the team arrived at the campsite where the first attack occurred. This is where they found Sanchez's body, who had died from his injuries, along with the dog that they had been helping in the search. Led them to Jordan, the suspect, who was covered in blood, and they arrested him. What's disturbing about this, too, is that this guy, Jordan, had been known to be a nuisance on the trail for several months. In mid-April, prior to this, he allegedly threatened several hikers at a shelter in Tennessee. When the hikers arrived at a hostel the following day, they reported the incident to Mike Hensley, the sheriff of Unicoi County, Tennessee, who interviewed them that night. And, they knew that they had a problem with this guy, and when they talked to these hikers, the sheriff said, well, this really got, their attention. And upon hearing that, Hensley said they were, they immediately deployed deputies, but they were unable to locate this guy, Jordan. Authorities in North Carolina observed him a day or two later, but there was no warrant for his arrest, so they did not detain him. According to Sheriff Hensley, on April 22nd of 2019, Jordan appeared at a road crossing where trail angels were handing out food to through hikers. Jordan initiated a verbal argument with some of the backpackers there, who also alerted authorities. He was apprehended with a fake ID, marijuana, and other drug paraphernalia. He was also carrying a 17-inch survival knife. That knife is now in an evidence room. It is unclear whether he purchased the knife used to kill the hikers that weekend or... Unfortunately, none of the hikers who had been assaulted by Jordan in the April incident were willing to press charges or testify against him in court. So Jordan was arrested only for the fake ID and drug charges. He pleaded guilty and was ordered to stay off the trail, which obviously he didn't do. According to Hensley, he did everything under the full extent of the law to keep this guy off trail. His intention was to get him off trail for his own safety and the safety of others. Now, that brings us up to recently, in a sanity evaluation, Jordan, the doctors found that he suffered from schizophrenic disorder and acute psychotic symptoms and concluded that he was unable to appreciate the wrongfulness of his acts. This is according to court records. Both federal prosecutors and federal public defenders reached an agreement that Jordan should plead not guilty by reason of insanity. The lawyers also said that the mental health experts noted that Jordan had never been consistently and appropriately treated for his mental illness until he was arrested and sent for psychiatric treatment, which is just, a complete failure of the system, and it's just awful. Jordan's lawyers released a statement that said Jordan is deeply remorseful for his and profound sorrow he caused. However, both the families of the victims in this case released their statements, and Sanchez's family and surviving stabbing victims sent impact statements to U.S. District Court Judge James P. Jones about how the episode has changed their lives forever. His sister said that Ronald was a great father to his 2 children, both teenagers. He had so much more that he wanted to do before he was senselessly taken from this earth. The other surviving stabbing victim wrote that she was haunted by Mr. Jordan's actions, and she recalled watching Jordan transform before her very eyes from a bewildered, confused man into a violent animal. She said she saw him attack and murder a good, kind man, and remember his eyes when she tried to run. She looked over his shoulder. They were just burned into her mind. And I can't imagine the terror and the horror. This is just an awful situation in case, any way that you look at it. In a hearing on Thursday, Judge Jones accepted Jordan's plea and found him not guilty solely by reason of insanity on charges of murder, attempted murder, and 3 counts of assault. On Friday, Jones ordered Jordan committed to federal custody until he is recovered from his mental disease or defect. Which I don't know whether that means he has to be in a hospital for a certain amount of time. It didn't give amount of years, and I can see where this would be really devastating to the families and the surviving victims, because that it's just a very open-ended thing. And I'm not saying that we don't need to help and care for people that have mental illness, but at the same time, I can't imagine what the families are going through, and Ronald's children, and this whole case is just a complete nightmare. And it's also, scarred the Appalachian Trail and the hiking community in general. I mean, these kind of things are absolutely terrifying. And, you go out on trail to enjoy nature and you end up in an absolute living nightmare. And one thing I did find a little curious was that his lawyer said that the mental health experts had said that he had never been consistently or appropriately treated for his mental illness. But then in Jordan's own statements, he said that he was sorry for his lifelong battle with mental illness and ultimately resulted in this trauma. So I don't know. Again, I don't know. I know there's all different types of schizophrenia, and I don't know where the personal responsibility ends and the system and the healthcare is supposed to take over. But I know a lot of people have filed this case, and I know that this case affected a lot of people, and I wanted to talk to you guys about it because I wanted to get your feedback on it now that the judge has made her ruling. And this case happened back in 2019, but then because of COVID things were delayed, and now it's finally been concluded, at least from a legal standpoint of view. And I wanted to get your thoughts and opinions on it, and also talk to you about it because it's a very sad case every way you look at it. I don't know, it's just, the whole case is just absolutely devastating, and my heart and prayers go out to the families, and I'm hoping that the surviving victim, she can find a way to get over this. I can't imagine, because it just sounds like a living nightmare. And hopefully Mr. Sanchez's family can find closure and move on, but it's going to be a long healing process. And I just wanted to dedicate this video to Ronald Sanchez, and I don't know the other woman's name, but anybody that was affected by this. And my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody involved, and it's just an awful case. And I wanted to talk about it not only so that we can hopefully prevent tragedies like this from happening again, but also to honor the fallen. I mean, Ronald Sanchez was an American hero. He served our country, and he lost his life way too early to a terrible tragedy that probably could have been prevented. I don't know. And this other woman now has to live with post-traumatic stress and all these other things. So just awful. My thoughts and prayers go out to every one of them. And please let me know in the comments what you think of the outcome of this case. I'd like to hear from you guys. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.